should you build a SaaS product or a SaaS company? Now, SaaS, which stands for Software as a Service, is just an easy way to describe a business or an app model where users pay you to use your app generally on a monthly or an annual basis, and they're paying you as a software provider versus paying for and installing a software program on their own computer, for example. So you use SaaS apps online, so you need an internet connection to use them, because you won't be installing them on your computer, for example. And it's normally the app owner, the service provider, who is storing all the users' data. So that would be you storing all of your users' data. So that's kind of an overview of what a SaaS product is. And apps that fall into this category are apps like MailChimp, Slack, QuickBooks Online. There are tons and tons and tons of SaaS products out in the world, definitely ones that you yourself use probably on a daily basis. So what are the pros and the cons of these? Well, from a user's standpoint, there are some really big benefits to using SaaS products versus downloading that software onto their computer, for example. So number one, the upfront costs are generally lower. So like I said, usually SaaS products come with a monthly subscription fee, maybe an annual subscription fee, potentially both, with a discount on the annual subscription. And this is just going to be a lower upfront cost. It's going to be easier for your users to kind of plug and play without investing too much upfront, because they don't have to download anything. They don't have to pay a larger upfront fee to actually purchase the software outright, for example. It's also really easy to access these apps because you can do so from any device. You're not downloading anything, so you can access from your computer, from your desktop, your laptop, your phone, your tablet, whatever you want. This makes it really convenient for users. And it's also really easy to update SaaS products with software that you download on your computer. Usually you have to manually run updates from time to time. Your users don't have to do this with a SaaS product, because you as the founder would be updating the app on your end, and those updates would automatically take place on the user's end. So really, convenience is key here for users. And this is why tons of them opt for SaaS products versus going a more traditional route. And that's why you see a lot of SaaS products hitting the market today, and probably why you yourself might be considering this model. So as the app founder, for you as an entrepreneur, there are also some really big benefits to going this route, but there are some negatives too. And so that's kind of what I want to break down today. So first, before we go any further, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding. So let's dive in, starting with the pros, the benefits to building a SaaS product. So the biggest one, and if you are considering this route, probably the one you thought of first, is the recurring revenue. When you're building a SaaS product, generally you're going for that recurring revenue model. And recurring revenue is, this goes along with having that monthly fee or the annual fee, where when a user joins or a user becomes a paying customer, you know that their money is also going to be coming in the next month and the next month, or the next year and the next year, and so on. So you have this recurring revenue built up, where, even if you had to pull back on marketing or pull back on sales, for example, you would still have this revenue coming in. It's not 100% always dependent on that marketing and the sales that you're using to, bring more users in. So with recurring revenue, It means you have predictable revenue. And this is a really important point because predictable revenue allows you to smartly invest your money. So when you are aiming to grow your company, you're aiming to grow quickly up front, generally that's going to require an investment from you. You're going to have to invest in quick growth. That's the way it works. And so when you have this predictable revenue and you know how much money generally is coming in the next month, and the next month, and the next month, then you can plan ahead on how much you invest now, knowing that you're going to recoup those costs in the months coming down the road. So you can really smartly grow your company just because you have that recurring revenue, which is predictable revenue, which is revenue that you can invest into your growth or take and turn back and kind of push for more growth on the front end. So that's a really big factor when you are building a SaaS product. And with SaaS products, like I mentioned before, these are web apps. You need an internet connection to use them. And for you as the developer, as the founder, this is actually a really big benefit because it means that you don't have to deal with any of the hurdles that come along with, building native apps or putting your app in the app stores and so on. All you need to do is build the web app and you can be off to the races. All your users need is an internet connection and they can be off to the races. It's a really, like I said, it's a really convenient model, but not just for the users, for you as well. And it's not just convenient on the front end when you're initially building the product, but also on the back end too. When you're going to update it long term, you don't have to work around, wrapping your app, putting it in stores, updating it, and then, dealing with the next steps that come along with that when your app is in stores, for example. It's just on the internet, you make your updates are live, and you're ready to go. So this is a really big point for SaaS founders as well. And, a lot of the clients that we personally work with in our Built to Scale program, they're building SaaS apps as well. And a lot of them are agency owners, or they are consultants or service providers of some sort who generally are paid for their time. Now, they're building SaaS apps because it's a very scalable model. And this is another really big point. So, when you come from a background of having to trade your time in order to bring in that revenue, you hit a kind of a stopping point where either you have no more hours in the day to give because no one can make more time, and you can't clone yourself. So you're kind of stuck at this certain cap. And so a lot of the founders that we work with are in that position, and they're building this SaaS product to either transition into, away from that service model or away from that hourly or time-driven model and into a more scalable model where instead of working one-to-one with clients and customers, they can work one-to-many, and it's can be infinitely scalable. And others, instead of fully transitioning, they are adding on an arm to their business in the form of an app where they can reach a wider market and become more scalable aside from the main components of their business. So a SaaS model is very, very scalable. And those are some of the really big pros, the positives to going with this model. Now, there are lots of others, but those are the main ones that we're going to go over. And I want to touch on the negatives as well, because there are some drawbacks, as with any business model, any app model that you're going to go with. So I want to talk about those too. So first, with a SaaS product, there can be a longer sales cycle. Now, here's what I mean. So a sales cycle, essentially you are making that very first touch point with your prospective user. And then at a certain point, you're turning them into a paying user or a paying customer. Now, all the time in between that, in bringing them to that point of becoming a paying user, is that sales cycle that you are going through, that you're taking them through, and they're going through as well. Now, with SaaS products, this can be a little bit longer, and this is going to depend on the payment or the pricing structure that you go with, one of the popular ones is having a tiered structure. So you have a free plan or a free version with the app, and then you might have a tier above that and a tier above that, and it gets more expensive as you go up with access to more features and so on. Now with a free plan, this can be tough because sometimes users come in and they sign up for this free plan. They're not committed. There's nothing holding them to it. It sounds like a good idea in the moment, but then they forget about it. They never come back on. They never actually use the app. You send them lots of emails or you try to schedule calls and maybe they're lost. And again, the different scenarios of this can happen with many different payment models and app models, but just speaking to SaaS in particular. Now, another thing to think about with the free model or this free plan is, some people who come on, they're just never going to upgrade. And that's part of the sort of what you're anticipating is when people come on, they join your free plan, eventually they're going to need one of those higher paid plans. Now, this is dependent on their growth, and sometimes they just never get there. And so, the sales cycle, it just never converts, or it ends up being really long. Maybe it takes them a really long time to get up to that next level, and so on. There are also free trials with lots of SaaS products where a user signs up for a free trial. Maybe they give credit card details, maybe they don't, and then obviously the goal is to convert them by the end of that free trial. Sometimes this can involve lots of emails, lots of demo calls trying to be scheduled. DocuSign is a product where they try to, when you're reaching the end of that free trial, they really try to get you on a demo call to speak with one of their sales reps to keep you on board. So obviously this takes funding and time and energy and finances to keep up. So you just have to think about that sales cycle and kind of plan for how you're going to convert your users and shorten that cycle as much as you can. So with a SaaS product, now this is from a more development viewpoint, all of your users' data is going to be stored by you in one place. And that means that your app has to be built in a really optimized way for privacy and for security, because you want to make sure that the right users have access to the right data and information. So this means creating the correct structure, making sure all your user roles are correctly in place. So, this isn't necessarily a negative. It's just something that you're really going to need to focus on if you're building this type of product where you're housing all that user information in one place. And then the last point I want to touch on is that with a SaaS model, we had talked about having the ability to have that predictable revenue and to kind of steer it back or push it back towards your growth. But with a SaaS model, you can have slower growth on the front end sometimes if your revenue depends on having a large user base, which is often the case. So in order to grow to higher revenue levels, you have to have a really large user base. Now, of course, this is going to depend on your price point, but for a lot of SaaS products, if there's a monthly subscription, it's relatively low because you're going for the mass market appeal, and that means you need a lot of users on board, and it can take time to build up that user base to get to a point where you have higher revenue levels and you're profitable. Now, on the other side of that, you have that recurring revenue, that predictable revenue that you can invest back into your growth. So again, not necessarily a negative. There are going to be these types of factors no matter what type of model you go for, but this is something to expect with the SaaS model in particular. So that's what I'm going to kind of wrap up with, are those main positives and the main kind of negative factors, really just factors that you need to keep in mind and really think about as you move forward. Now, there are lots of others, but because we work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are building this type of app and going for this type of model, we know that these are the factors that really weigh heavily in their decision-making process. as they move forward. So I hope that's helpful for you. Now, if you're building a SaaS app and you are just getting started or you haven't started yet, we do have a free training. If you head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, and we will guide you through those initial planning stages with your app so that you can get through that process quickly, which is where a lot of people get stuck, and just dive into development so that you can start working towards all of those positives that come along with having the SaaS model. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk soon.